So for me, looking at the eccentric part of the stretch shortening cycle became really, really important. I want to see the input, and there's different inputs. We have shocks and springs, two different things, right? So shocks, right? These are eccentric actions in a stretch shortening cycle where we attenuate forces, we manage it. When I'm coaching, I'm probably going to say absorb them. On the other hand, we got springs. Springs are eccentric movements that set up and potentiate the next movement. So one is about controlling, managing, attenuating eccentric force. The other one's about using it to set up the next thing better. These happen at different speeds, probably through some different tissues with different motor strategies. But just go watch sport and you're going to see both happen.
Hey everybody, I'm your host Anthony Wren, and welcome to episode 418 of the Strength Coach Podcast. We're talking about relevant topics with top coaches in the fitness industry to help you become a better trainer, therapist, strength coach, or business owner. All right, we are brought to you by Perform Better, the experts in functional training and rehabilitation. The summits are over, but that doesn't mean the education has stopped at the Perform Better Functional Training Institute in Rhode Island. They have a bunch of stuff coming up, a speaker school, a movement workshop, and a business workshop. It all takes place in Rhode Island at the Perform Better Functional Training Institute. They have a full gym there, and they have a full lecture room, and they're doing some great stuff there. You can check it out at performbetter.com for the schedule and sign up. They also do a bunch of webinars with people as well that you'll find on that page, on their education page. Don't forget, Perform Better always has a sale as well. They have a little icon up top that says sale. Just check that out and you can see what's on sale. Check it all out at performbetter.com. All right, today, speaking of top coaches, I have on Ken Vick. He's been doing this for over 30 years, working with a lot of Olympic committees, professional franchises, sports organizations. He leads high performance teams. He has his own facility and he has some recovery facilities as well. And so Ken was actually the one who tweeted about shocks and springs. So if you're a listener, you know Coach Boyle and I spoke about that a couple episodes ago and started to get that conversation going. But I really wanted to get Ken on to go pretty deep. And that's what we did. We're going to go deep with plyometrics, elasticity, springs and shocks, coaching the whole thing as well, coaching Plyos, some of the language that we use. And then we're going to finish up with stress and recovery. Ken has a couple of recovery facilities as well. So we're going to go all into that. All right, don't forget, September 18th, 4 p.m. Eastern Time, Kevin Carr, Brendan Rearick, both from Certified Functional Strength Coach, they're teaming up with the Business for Unicorns, Mark Fisher. They're going to do a webinar together. The Missing Piece, consistently excellent training sessions. If you listen to last episode, Mark went over, just kind of gave you a good overview of what he means by the missing piece. And so obviously this is going to go deep from the business aspect and from the training aspect. That's why they're teaming up together. It's all free. So you can sign up at the link in the show notes. Guys, don't forget to check out businessforunicorns.com. They have a ton of free resources for you. All right, we're going to start the show off today with the NAAMLY Maximizing the Member Experience with Sumit Seth, the co-founder of NAAMLY, and he's on to discuss something called debate, decide, and do. And essentially, it's a decision framework. And he's going to go over each part in detail. It's something that he realized he was using. A friend of his started to talk about it, and he realized, he's like, you are doing this at NAAMLY. You've been doing this forever. And so Sumit wanted to kind of give it out to you guys and talk about it. So it's really the importance of this framework is to kind of build teamwork and increase productivity within your company. So great stuff as always. So check it out with Sumit Seth.
Hey everyone, welcome to NAAMLY's Maximizing the Member Experience segment with your co-host, Sumit Seth, me, the co-founder of NAAMLY. Debate, decide, do. That's the framework that we're going to talk about today. A framework which, unknowingly to me, I've been using and perfecting over the last several years, as told to me by my colleague and friend. Backstory, let's back up for a bit. So my friend went to this mastermind event hosted by our pals over at Results Fitness University, where they had invited over the legendary basketball coach, Kevin Eastman. And he came up with this framework: debate, decide, do, paraphrasing it a bit. And when my friend came back, he was like, Sumit, that is the same framework that you've been using all along. So you've perfected it. And I was like, what framework are you talking about? And when he told me and he went into the depth and details, I was like, yeah, yes, that's so true. And I had just stumbled upon this way of doing things because I just felt right. And also because of this whole adage that I believe in, which goes something to the effect that if you want to go far, you go together. But if you want to go fast, you go alone. And over at NAAMLY, we always want to go far. So that's why we incorporated this. Now, what are these three pieces? The first piece, debate, is all about discussions. And these are not any discussions. These are like passionate discussions where we bring together the whole team and everyone voices their concerns, voices the opportunities, the hurdles, the challenges, the possibilities. It's all about getting a different perspective, different point of views. Because once you get those different point of views, it's almost like doing a SWOT analysis, a strength, weakness, opportunity, threat, a management term to understand what are we up against. And once you know that, the whole idea is to seek truth, to seek clarity. And that's what you're shooting for. Once you've debated and you have all these options laid out for you, then now you decide. Now, decision, there's something that I want to talk to you about over here is the decision doesn't necessarily mean that you, the owner, decides. What it means is that the person who is in charge, the lead, the department head, your general manager, that person, the person who gets to call the shots and who owns the outcomes, he or she is responsible for taking that decision based off of the debate that you've already done. That way you're doing a few things. You're helping them step up to the next level because it's not only about taking decisions, it's also about taking responsibility. But with responsibility comes authority, which is what you end up giving when you practice this really, really well. And the next and the last piece is the do part. Now it's time to act. And action is so cool because at the end of the day, if you've taken over everyone's feedback and you brought them together, then now you got unity. And unity is such a powerful thing because now it's no longer about I said so, you thought so. It's we're all committed to making it happen, and it's bringing in this staff alignment. Because there's another adage that I believe in, which is team building is company building. And this is how you build a team that goes and bats for each other because they feel heard and seen. Now, as a gym owner, you may wonder, how do I incorporate this? Well, think about it. I want you to go back in time, reflect upon a time when you came up with, let's say, a new program, a new onboarding process, a new software, a new hire, and things, the team accepted it initially and they said yes, they nodded their heads in the meeting, but when the rubber met the road, it didn't really go according to plan and nothing moved. And if it didn't move, it's because as leaders, we missed out on bringing them together, having their voices heard. You want them to have their voices heard. Once you do that, you will find that the energy, the commitment, the follow through that comes about in doing tasks is it's like magic. You feel it, you see it, you get the vibes. So my request to you would be to come back and think about that and then build that piece in, because it's a beautiful thing about getting clarity and consistency that builds the trust. That's pretty much what we did at NAAMLY as well. Some time ago, we were faced with this decision about should we build billing and scheduling. We didn't want to be a feature junkie, but we debated this topic ad nauseum. We discussed it internally, passionate about it, talking about the hurdles, the possibilities, the money that it would cost, as well as, hey, nobody likes their billing and scheduling system today, and we want to be like, are we going to be different? Will we be different? We debated it. We decided as a team together, and then we got to work. We brought the best gym owners, some of the top performing gym owners together, took their insights, took their inputs, and now we have built this tool, this amazing tool that works together, juxtaposes well with each other, and it's just one seamless system. So next time round, my dear friends, the thing that I would love for you to do is practice, practice, practice. Practice this debate, decide, do framework in your gyms today, in your business today, and tell me if the things don't start to change in your business and the magic starts happening. Hit me up. Hopefully you enjoyed this segment today. And if you want more of these segments, send me a message, call me. It'll be great. Till next time, adios.
All right, guys, now I got on Ken Vick. For over 30 years. He has coached athletes and led high performance teams for Olympic committees, professional franchises, and sports organizations around the world. His work spans 10 Olympic Games, 17 countries, and 40 plus professional and Olympic sports. He's known for cutting through the noise in performance recovery and athlete development, translating science into systems that actually work in the real world. And if you listen to last episode, we talked about this shocks and springs idea from one of his tweets. We're going to talk about that in a minute. And Coach Boy was even saying, Ken has a really good way of taking some of the science out there and kind of breaking it down. So I wanted to get him on myself. Ken, thanks for coming on, bud.
All right. Happy to be here.
All right. Loved. I'm going to read everybody that tweet again that we talked about with Coach Boyle. When I read it, I was like, I instantly got in touch with you through Twitter, right? Because I was like, I got to get him on to talk more about this. Because I knew I was going to talk to Boyle about it, but I knew obviously this was your idea, and you had so many great examples, and it really made sense to me in that little thread on Twitter. So I'll read everybody the tweet, and we'll set this up. It said, many practitioners train elasticity, in quotes, like it's one thing. It's probably not. Your body has different structures to store elastic energy, and they likely work at different speeds. That's what really kind of caught me. Consider both, and you'll have more tools for your athletes. Now, he also said elastic qualities in athletes are not as much about how the spring recoils. It's about how it gets loaded. And I think we fall into a trap of focusing on concentric output, that recoil, in movement, but the eccentric portion is probably more important. Now, before we get into this a little bit, you said elasticity in mechanics has a precise mechanical definition: the ability of a material to store and return energy upon deformation. But its practical use in sports performance and rehabilitation is far more ambiguous. So I want you to clear up some of that ambiguity before we kind of get into the shocks and springs idea. Talk to us about elasticity and where kind of that ambiguous piece comes in.
Well, that's a big ask. Cleaning up ambiguity in our field is kind of a big thing, right? But I think it starts with understanding and communicating. And those aren't the same thing. So for me, when I think about this stuff and to clear up ambiguity, as a professional, I need to have an understanding. When I teach new coaches or I work with people on my team and practitioners, I need to have a really good understanding. That's based on science. But that only takes us so far. So then we need words, we need to communicate, we need systems and frameworks to use these things. So our field, Anthony, always is really interesting. We have the one side of our field always arguing for precision, exact science, exact scientific words and definitions, but those don't necessarily work when we're coaching real humans. They don't communicate an idea. So it's really strange because I don't think it's so much clearing up ambiguity. It's having both to be a really good practitioner. Now, there's levels of that, right? You don't have to know all the science. You have to have a framework that you understand and can use. And I think that's okay for most practitioners. They don't need to be able to go into the lab. They don't need to go to a biomechanics conference and discuss it. They need to have a basic framework and understanding. And then they need actual words and cues that they can use with a client. So I don't even know if it's, really the right question to clear it up. But I know that's kind of a sidetrack. Elasticity, dude, it's one of those words that's just dangerous in our field. Power, strength. My least favorite word in our field is strength. Because if I talk to a parent, if I talk to an individual athlete, if I talk to a sports scientist, if I talk to the ATC or the PT, dude, all different ideas on what strength means. Oh, they need more strength. Really? What kind of strength? Strength doing what? Strength how? Like, strength's a dangerous word until we know what we're talking about.
Absolutely. Yeah, you're right. You're right. Because I think, what's the one question a lot of people always ask is how strong is strong enough, right? And then
Yeah.
nobody really has that answer except for that certain situation. Well, okay, I think if it's an adult, we need, this much strength. Or if it's an athlete, we need this much. Or a lineman, we need this much, right? And
Right.
where on the body do we need it? So there's a lot of different.
And I would take that even farther. Sorry, Anthony.
Yeah. Yeah.
For me, athletic strength is more than just weight on a barbell. There's lots of different qualities. And I think this is one of the things for me that happened early in my career. It just made me, just picking one thing didn't work because I saw too much watching sports. If you watch sports for a little bit, and this is something all practitioners probably should do more, not as fans, but just watch sports, you see all kinds of different qualities. So I think we need to know what we mean with these words, and then we need to figure out how to communicate what we want.
Yeah, absolutely. I saw that a lot in the golf world because golfers just, especially when I first went to Titleist and they started doing the first World Golf Fitness Summit, that was 2006. And they were really just entering this real popular market of strength, the strength training and performance for golfers. And we saw this idea where people kind of looked at golfers and were like, well, they're not, how could they're these little guys, they're not strong. But they exhibited the qualities that they needed to have a really powerful golf swing, swinging 125 now to 130 miles an hour, right? And so, yeah. So, I mean, I think we saw that a lot in golf where people had this misconception of where and what and who, like a Phil Mickelson, for example, who looked like this kind of floppy, overweight at the time. And at those times, it's the kind of, I would do a lecture. I had a picture of Phil Mickelson and people like I put bodybuilder, a runner. Then I put Phil up because it was about golf and they would start chuckling like, oh yeah, Phil, he's goofy, and a little chunky. So,
but he's got the right strength qualities for
absolutely.
What he needs to do.
100%.
That's it.
100%. Well, let's get into this idea too about another quote from you. The one thing you need to know about the stretch shortening cycle. There are two types of eccentric functions: shocks and springs. And I'll let you kind of define those and talk about going faster and slower, because this really. I mean, for me, when I heard this, it really, working with adults, not elite athletes, and working with adults who are a lot of golfers and still, but I was like, ooh, because everybody does, we were talking about earlier, for me, everybody has their power. We're going to do, whether we call it, we'll get into it later, but jump training or plyometrics or managing force, whatever it is. I have a lot of people do. Every single person is doing that for me. So let's get into the shocks and springs idea.
Well, here's the one thing I would tell a coach, a practitioner, a therapist. Here's where to start thinking about this. We need to not just look at the outputs. Like you said, we're training for power, we're doing whatever. Let's look at the input into that. So we got this whole range of stretch shortening cycles. And you come into this field, no matter what, you're going to learn something about Plyos and med balls and different jump training, like you said, right? Organizing it early on gets really freaking hard. I struggled as a young coach. Back when I started, the Plyo stuff was, I was a weightlifting coach first, coached international weightlifters. So I had a lot of influence from the traditional Russian literature, right? The Verkhoshansky stuff, everything. Don Chu was big at the time. Jimmy Radcliffe had his stuff. Byrne was obviously talking about things. But it was still all over. Organizing it wasn't easy. So for me, looking at the eccentric part of the stretch shortening cycle became really, really important. I want to see the input, and there's different inputs. We have shocks and springs, two different things, right? And if you as a practitioner or coach or whatever can start just expanding the way you think into those, I think it's really helpful. So shocks, right? These are eccentric actions in a stretch shortening cycle where we attenuate forces, we manage them. When I'm coaching, I'm probably going to say absorb them. Not technically right, but like you guys talked about, but I'm attenuating them. These are things that's the purpose though. That's what I got to do. On the other hand, we got springs. Springs are eccentric movements that set up and potentiate the next movement. So one is about controlling, managing, attenuating eccentric force. The other one's about using it to set up the next thing better. These happen at different speeds, probably through some different tissues with different motor strategies. But just go watch sport and you're going to see both happen. And I struggled early because it was kind of all lumped together. Oh, yeah, you're doing a stretch shortening cycle. Well, the slow one doesn't look anything like the big one. And for me, when I got exposed to some different sports, it really drove it home.
You did a great job in the tweet of examples of both. Can you do that so people can kind of get an idea of like how this would be applied in the sport when you're watching these sports and you said that's slow, that's fast, that's a shock, that's a spring. Can you go over that?
Yeah. So think shock absorbers first, right? We have on a car, we have shock absorbers. What are they doing? They are taking the impact, the bumps, they're smoothing out the ride, they're making sure our frame's not damaged. Well, we have sports where that's happening. When somebody is running full speed and they have to stop and go the other direction, look, that doesn't happen in one step. It's a couple steps. Those steps, the purpose of the eccentric action is going to be to attenuate and control so you don't break down and get hurt, right? So we can see movements that are moving at higher speeds, bigger loads, right? They have to go generally through a bigger range of motion and a longer ground contact time. But the whole purpose is controlling it. Your most classic thing is anything coming down from a jump, a landing, whether that's a basketball player coming down, the volleyball player, the slope style, snowboarder who lands from a huge jump. The purpose there of the eccentric during that stretch shortening cycle is attenuating. So that's shocks. Springs, we think of springs way more often. That's that quick movement. It's that quick cut. It's that fast twitchy movement. Everybody gets excited. Coaches start talking about this. We're training all these pogo jumps for quote unquote elasticity. That's what we traditionally think of springs, but it's also a really quick wind up and a punch, right? The stretch shortening cycle through that upper body. It's part of a throw, right? When that pitcher winds up, that stretch that's happening, that's potentiating the next action. That's a spring. So anything that's the goal is to now launch something, throw it, project through the air, that counter movement is a spring type action. And look, I'm giving you two things. It's a continuum like anything, right? It's not pure. But thinking of two things starts you going in a direction that makes it, for me, easier to analyze sports when I see them. And it makes it easier for me to now figure out how to program.
I would agree with that because even, once just from reading that tweet, for me, I started to think about that in the gym with some of my people and thinking we want to catch both of these, especially with the golfers. I was, the way I was thinking about it was, we have this backswing that's really slow. So similar, like we're kind of starting to store that energy, right? So it's really good to load. Jason Glass likes to say load and explode. But there's a slow movement. Golf pros would tell you to go back super slow, but then it's really quick. Like those hips come back and at one point it's like boom, boom. So what I started last week working on with people is like a little bit more of a load and explode, a slower load and exploding out of that, and then making sure I was already doing that by accident, but now I'm actually thinking about, okay, no, we have to make sure we get both of those. Am I on the right track with that?
Yeah, I think so. I think you hit a really big point. I mean, we need both, and most sports are going to have some degree of both. And like I said, I go from step one is watch a sport. Right? So go watch the sport. What are the stretch shortening cycles in that sport? Or what are they in daily life? What happens? But if you watch it, you're going to see, okay, field court sports, they probably have some of each. Now you might get an individual player or a position that, oh, they need to be a little bit more springy, right? That's the way they play. That's their game. Quick, twitchy. They're using that springs side of the equation. There's other guys that are maybe more on pushing. There's more loads. There's different positions, alignment. Maybe these guys, that offensive lineman, he's got to absorb he's got to attenuate, control those forces as he takes that defensive line. So watch the sport. That's for me where I start. So I think you're thinking about those things. And I go to a second step though. So step one, watch. Step two for me is now decide how I want to use stretch shortening cycles. And this was a bit of a differentiating for me because I think there's three ways we can do it. When I program, I found myself doing this by accident. I was sometimes programming those stretch shortening cycles to build a strength capacity, to build the qualities, not a specific movement, just build the quality. Like I was having guys do depth jumps for something, and this was to build the strength in their legs and their explosiveness. I didn't have a specific purpose. Sometimes though, as you're doing return to play and rehab, you're doing it to train a quality. I want to make tougher tissues, right? I want them to handle these loads. So case one, I'm just building better breaks. I'm building the strength qualities. Case two, I'm building tougher tissues. And then there's case three, I'm trying to train a specific movement. So that step for me is now the next piece is like, okay, what am I trying to do? And then I get to the last step, which is, okay, figure out where I'm trying to get and work backwards, reverse engineer the process from extensive to intensive.
Can you just touch on this idea? I think part of where we've not gone wrong, but part of where the confusion can be is this idea where I've heard this like, oh, well, and you heard on the last podcast, we were talking about, is it plyometrics or should we just call it jump training or absorbing force? Because, but the idea that, hey, when you're going slow, we're not using the stretch shortening cycle like plyometrics would. Can you you've heard, I know you've heard that. Can you touch on that?
Yeah, it's a debate that's been going on for decades. It keeps going on. I've seen a lot of it lately. Here's the bottom line, Anthony. I don't care what you call it. That's the thing. And I think we do a disservice by getting so caught up in what is plyometric or not. What is Verkhoshansky's official shock methodology versus what's not. We get screwed up enough talking about a depth jump versus a drop jump, which is for quick contact, what's for height. Like we're so caught up and worried about that. And that 250 milliseconds isn't that magical. It was picked for some good reasons, but it was picked for certain things. It's not the answer for everything. So here's one of the things. I had this conversation with some coaches and interns just a couple of weeks ago. I would ask most people, how long do you really think a counter movement jump is? Okay, we talk about ground contact times, 250 milliseconds. How long do you think a typical, among an athlete, counter movement jump is? So what do you think?
It was at like, if I'm going to do like a vertical jump, for example.
Yeah, for height. I'm going for height. The instruction is for height. I'm jumping for height.
Yeah, I mean, 1 second at the most. Yeah,
right. Like these things range from the high 700s to a second in most athletes.
Yeah.
And we're running around talking only about 250 milliseconds. There's a whole big gap in there. And you want something really long with that stretch shortening cycle, go watch like a downhill skier in Grand Slalom with these big, huge turns. That turn is all eccentric forces, but they're popping out of it to the next one. These things get over a second long. So we've got this thing that's been hammered in our head from school, from books I've read, from conferences, 250 milliseconds. It's not perfect, but I look at very fast ones as actually under 180 milliseconds. Seen enough sports, different things. 280 is fast. Slower is getting over like 480 or so, but there's things that are going over a second. It's hard to know how much elasticity we store and how long. That's really complicated. Like the science we talked about earlier, it's in single tissues, it's in really discrete things that's been measured. As a system, where's the elasticity stored? Wow, that's way harder. But there's stuff, the half-life is supposed to be about 880 milliseconds. okay, where we lose half that energy. But that's losing half. So we still got a lot. Maybe it's not as good, but I can have things that take a long time. Go to a squat. Do you want to do one? What's going to be easier? Doing one with a pause at the bottom or one where you go down and up?
Down and up.
Yeah, but that's still way longer in time frame. You're talking seconds. So I think here's my point, takeaway. If as a coach or practitioner, you can just go beyond this plyometrics and stretch shortening cycle thought to know there's a whole world, a whole range of speeds, man, you're going to be able to do a lot more to tune your athletes the right way.
I understand about the language of it. And you're right. I could care less. We talked earlier, and we're going to kind of get into this a little bit. When you're speaking to the client, I mean, you're not going to say these 50-cent words. That would be ridiculous. No one cares. But in my head, I'm thinking, am I doing them a disservice with this exercise? Am I really getting taking advantage of the stretch shortening cycle? Because we're misinformed, and we weren't thinking about this. This is why this made me think. Your original tweet made me think about these different speeds. And what I thought was interesting was there's also different parts of the body. Like I said, obviously I'm going to golf, but there's different parts of the body that are going at different low. The hips are going much faster, and they're going, if you listen to Greg Rose and the kinematic sequence, and you're taking some 3D imaging, whether it's baseball or tennis or golf or whatever, you're seeing that those different parts are accelerating and decelerating at different times. Yeah. And that's the sequence or the whip effect, right? I think we made it more confusing. That's really what I feel like you're saying too. We made it more confusing. Like, stop worrying about all that other stuff. These are well, you just gave a great example with the skis. I saw the one video that really brought it to life for me was the volleyball player waiting at the bottom, waiting for the whole setup to explode into that setup, right?
Well, so volleyball is a great example for me because early in my career, I was out here in Southern California. I was getting to work in an integrated setting, but in the performance side, we had tons of volleyball players at SoCal. But this was both beach and indoor. So we had pros and Olympians, the highest level in the same sport in theory, but not. And I would watch as a pro from overseas, right? They're one of the top players in the world. They come back, it's off season. They're going to play pro beach for the off season. The same thing that made them quick, explosive, reactive on the hard court didn't translate over. Now, the players that spent all year on the beach, they didn't go play indoors. They were tuned differently. And I like that concept from Shocks and Springs of tuning, right? So when we got the indoor player going to beach, we took some time to retune their stretch shortening cycles and their shocks because that sand gives. Vice versa, when we'd have a player coming off the sand going to play indoor, we had to be really careful and tune them up for the harder surface. They had to prepare those tendons. And this started me thinking, it made it like, it just hit it home. I got a top player in the world, but they just went from flying high indoors. Now it's not the same outdoors. And they're telling me these things. So yeah, it's a great contrast to really see that and have to think about it.
Can you give us some examples of like kind of programming, specific examples? Like you're saying, okay, here's how we're going to program the vertical jump, or some bounds or some rotational jumps, whatever it is. Can you just give us an example to kind of be able to hit the spectrum of both of those different speeds, not both speeds, of the continuum of speeds?
First important thing, when I talk about stretch shortening cycles, I am not just talking about jump type exercises, right? Jumps, bounds, anything ballistic. I'm also talking about medicine balls. They are in the same framework for me. It's a stretch shortening cycle. Med balls are just our amazing tool to do it in a rotational type of movement. So how do you program them? How do you use them in some way? I think of it as tuning. I think I said that before, right? So shocks and springs are on almost every car and vehicle. But how they're tuned, how they work is going to be really different on a springy motocross bike, on a Formula One car, on a luxury sedan that rides smooth, or then the really heavy construction equipment that's got to handle a lot of abuse and heavy loads. They all have shocks and springs, but they're tuned differently. And that's what I see us doing with that part of the stretch shortening cycle. I see us tuning it through training. So simple version, how do we do it? One, I like to do some things to evaluate it within an athlete. General younger population, adults, we don't have to test it, but an athlete, I want to test to get some views of shocks and springs. I think we miss that as an industry. Everybody loves counter movement jumps, but we're missing out. After I've done that, look, you start from extensive and you move to intensive. But extensive, I think when I say that extensive jumping or extensive plyos for a lot of people, they're going to think a lot of pogo jumps, and they're great. Love them. Think they're useful. But that's tuning the spring side. If I want to tune the shocks side, if I want extensive work there, I have to do something that goes through a bigger range of motion, that has more joints moving, because that's what shocks are going to require. They're going to require a bigger range of motion. They're going to require more joints contributing to the action. So if I now get into some full range, soft, smooth for rhythm type jumps, if I work into some of our deep bounce ones we use, Matt McInnes-Watson's done a good job of showing this. He's really been able to promote it, I think, and him being a former jumper, he's able to give really good visual examples. But I believe the same thing. And I was taught this in track. Heck, I was taught this in weightlifting. We need things through those deeper ranges. So extensive is the start. You work both. At the same time, for me, I'm going to line up some of my strength qualities. If I'm focused more on springs and I need to get a performance outcome or a rehab, I'm probably going to line this up with more isometrics. If I'm focused on shocks and I need that outcome, I'm going to probably be doing more eccentric strength training. So there's a little bit of bias, but I'm never giving up. I won't say never. Most of the time, I'm not giving up one or the other. I'm biasing the training as a whole to one or the other. Now, how do you fit it in? If it's extensive work, eventually it's part of a warm-up. It's simple stuff. It can be done, dosed all the time. As you move to intensive, right, now we get into crazy bounds and depth jumps and other things. Yeah, you got to be really smart how you dose and where you use these things. So that's a much more in-depth. But bottom line, I need to work both sides, shocks and springs, and I need to work from extensive to intensive. I'm going to try to keep extensive all the time. Extensive for me is very much about building that tougher tissue, whether that's tendon, that's within the muscle, it's the fascial components. Extensive is really key there.
Can you give some of the newer coaches just some examples, definition or examples of intensive, extensive?
Yeah. So simple extensive on the spring side, like I said, pogo jumps, we all see, right? 2 legs, different vectors, different rhythms. That's great. If I go to the other side extreme, I'm in a split squat position. I'm doing a deep bounce where I'm only moving maybe 6 inches. Maybe I'm getting a little bit of air, but I'm only moving through a really short bouncy. And these extensives like that, it's about rhythm, it's about quality, it's about range of motion. So other extensives and shocks, just absorbing, I'm doing simple landings. You could argue a snap down. I'm not a huge fan, but people do lots of them. That's kind of an extensive shocks, right? If I'm doing some easier hurdle jumps that are for rhythm and slow, maybe I'm somewhere in the middle now, not doing a big jump. Here's the thing about extensive for a coach that's new to learning this. We're not focusing on outputs. That makes it extensive, right? When I'm focusing on a bigger output, bigger input, now it's intensive. If you're focusing on rhythm, quality, range of motion, you're in an extensive.
Just to kind of segue this into like the adult population, right?
Mm-hmm.
So somebody, they might play tennis or golf, but it's not everything for them. How do you approach the adult population? We know adults are losing power, quicker than they're losing strength, et cetera. How do you look at this from, they're not playing a sport, 7 days a week. It's pickleball twice a week or golf once or twice a week. So, but we want to still include some of this stuff because I think it's important. So how do you approach the adult population with this?
The same way. Now it's within context, but I look at the sport of life. What do they want to do for activities? Are they out running? Are they playing with kids? Are they playing with grandkids? Is it tennis? Is it life still has stretch shortening cycles? Go ahead, drop something and try to catch it. Slip off a curb or a step. You're going to have a stretch shortening cycle. Okay, they're out there in life, and hopefully people are staying active, right? So, okay, that's the sport of life. Next, when I come down to that second step of am I building stronger brakes, tougher tissues, or performance enhancement, the performance enhancement, the sharper movements, that might be off entirely or kind of an afterthought that it'll be a side effect, but that's not my focus. Tougher tissues, being able to protect tendons, ankles. We have a recovery business with my wife. We have a recovery studio. She's a tissue therapist, and we do different modalities, and we do tissue work as the main thing. But Anthony, our biggest market are pickleball players. And they are the adults that are going out and playing whose tissues have lost their elasticity, not just their power, but actually the elastic part of that stretch shortening cycle, the eccentric. This is where things are getting torn. And look, eccentric actions can damage or they can advantage, right? They are the things that cause acute injury. They're what cause DOMS, delayed onset muscle soreness. They're what cause repetitive stress and overuse injury. But they're also the things that let us move well as humans or athletes. So I need them. But yeah, we focus on people losing power. I've stepped that back in my own lens now, is that I think we're losing that bounce, that elasticity. So again, why do I do this? My second step, I'm choosing tougher tissues is probably the main thing I'm trying to do. I'm trying to make them resilient so they can keep doing this for a long time. And so that we stimulate those elastic qualities so the body doesn't get as densified. For our adults, I think of those extensive full range and deep range ballistics. I usually tend to call them jumps or ballistics. I think of those exercises as a really cool dynamic stretch. There's load, there's fascial gliding, I'm stimulating collagen and elastin, I'm doing all that science stuff, but I'm trying to keep that. So that's my goal. And when I, get to that last step of what's the outcome, how far do I want to take them? It all depends, but you can start this with anybody, with older clients. Now, it's all graded and there's ways to grade it, but I have come to believe over the last decade, this is key for every adult program, and we need to be doing more of this earlier.
Is there anything we should do to prepare some? Because you're right. I told you I work in Lifetime a couple of days a week, and pickleball is huge. And who enters that market is really some older people, which I've seen. Being in the golf world is like people like they start to retire, they get in their 40s, like, oh, I can't play hockey or basketball anymore, I'm going to go into golf, and then they all get hurt. So I tell people, physical therapists invented pickleball, because they're all getting hurt. So what are some things you're doing to prepare them before maybe you might say, look, some of the jump training might be a little too much for them right now? What are you doing to prepare them to get them to that point?
Yeah, I would take that extensive continuum way, way back. So the earliest and simplest things. Obviously, we have basic strength training, isometric things, low risk, high reward, slow basics, a split squat, a bilateral squat, basic movements. They're part of it. But pretty early, we can unload these other movements. So I've seen this, we've used it in rehab. And years ago, I started translating into some of our adult programs, and it's worked shockingly well. Unload them, put a band above them on a rig or a rack, let them pull it down, unload, and get little rhythmic jumping. So now we're doing less than body weight, but we're stimulating that quality. But again, the goal is not output. It's not to jump higher because you got that band. It's just to get the rhythm. We're building tougher tissues. And that one works awesome. Same thing, just oscillating stuff. Get into that front foot elevated split squat position and just bounce a little bit, smooth and rhythmically. You're going to learn a lot. It's a pretty interesting qualitative test to see which people can keep some rhythm and bounce and who can't. But those are ways we can start getting these qualities in a relatively low risk and controlled manner, and then build from there.
That's where a lot of people, I've seen the mistake is, these young trainers, somebody will be playing pickleball, or, they want to get into pickleball and they'll start training them, and they kind of act like they're fine to just go right into it, to step right into it. And I think that is a huge mistake, because then we're not really preparing them for what's going to happen, never mind on the court, but what's really, what they're doing to them within that session.
Totally.
It could be dangerous. Another quote you had along this line, because I want to talk about coaching this,
Okay.
the language. I mean, you had talked about the word absorb, right? And then, we listened to Coach Boyle last week talk about, is it managing is it absorbing? Is it managing? You said it could be a good coaching cue, but in biomechanics, eccentric action in a cut or depth jump isn't absorbing, it's attenuating. So we're not soaking up force like a sponge. We're managing, redirecting, and often reusing it. But we do have to speak to people, our clients who aren't, talking about this stuff every day. So just talk to a little bit about coaching people, the coaching cues, and the language to help us kind of get people to understand some of this stuff.
Yeah, I mean, go ahead. If you want somebody to land better off a jump or a cut, go tell them to attenuate it. See how that turns out. We coach humans, right? And so we have to be able to communicate in a way that they can understand. We have to use analogies. Nick Winkelman does such a great job teaching about this in the field. Use something they already know. They're not going into a physics class for a test. So let me give them something they can understand that creates a picture and a feeling in their head. And absorb's a great word. Yeah, it's entirely wrong. Don't care. This is where we get so weird in this field. So look, and absorb might not work for somebody. For somebody else, it's going to be land soft. We had our off-season pro and college hockey group. I helped out this summer in one of our centers. It was fun to get to be coaching regularly again. But we had some guys that were doing some of these extensive type things and through bigger ranges. And one guy was struggling with some of that. So for him, we ended up somehow on a cue of, great, when you do that deep jump, I want you to set an egg on the ground softly. So he had to land smooth. He had to attenuate, control the forces so he could set the egg down on the ground. It got a big range of motion. Would I use that cue with everybody? No. So look, as a field, we need to not be elitist. We need to not do that to our clients. If you're a leader in the field, you better understand it. If you're teaching this stuff, I hope you understand the meaning behind it. But dude, we have to deliver something useful to our clients. That's our job.
Let's now get back into, I was saying earlier, this idea about stress. The recovery piece is so popular. Like, you hear so many people, recovery, this, sleep, and the ice baths and the saunas and the NormaTec, which by the way, I absolutely love. I use them almost every day. I was using the NormaTec so much at Lifetime that my wife got them for me for Christmas.
Nice.
So I guess she just wanted to keep me inside, but so you had said influencers and even so-called experts are conflating the term stress without truly understanding its depth. This confusion clouds important conversation and often leads people to chase the wrong solutions. Stress gets tossed around to describe everything from a tough week at work to a demanding training session. This lack of clarity has real consequences in the trenches of high-performance coaching, strength training, rehabilitation, and recovery. One of the things I was telling you earlier was like kind of, Dr. Sapolsky, who was talking a lot about like really kind of, I feel like almost introduced the strength and conditioning, or really got it popular in the strength and conditioning world about really, understanding stress, and really stress is stress is stress. We hear that a lot. Your body doesn't differentiate. I feel like, you're definitely saying that, no, it differentiates, and we need to kind of understand what kind of stress we're putting on. So can you elaborate more on this, talk about the consequences of not understanding this?
Yeah, here's the one thing I would share and want people to think about. Stress is both global and it's specific. So what do I mean? You talked about Sapolsky's idea and the zebras. And this is a key concept, right? Stress, wherever it's coming from, has some global effects on our body and our systems. 100%. And it can come from life, it can come from school, it can come from training, the sport, whatever. That idea is really important because we know all these things come together and then how we respond to that general idea of stress. Okay. But if we stop there and think all stress is the same, this is where we get screwed up. And so for me, where I started thinking about specific types of stress, one, from the training side, I know different training stresses induce different changes. When we started getting into recovery years ago, for me, recovery became important because I was training a lot of Olympic athletes, first weightlifters, then a lot of other Olympic sport. And my athletes did not have unlimited money in most of their sports, and they were going against people that were cheating using drugs. And those drugs were helping the athletes recover faster. So if my athletes were going to compete, I had to help them be better at recovery. And that took me down a pathway looking at, well, what do those performance enhancing drugs do? How do they help recovery? Which system? And over the years, we kept using this and trying to create a framework. And for me, there's 4 different pillars. You have tissue stress. There's structural stress, right? That's the micro damage we've been talking about during eccentric stuff, running tons of miles, the pounding on the body, the contact in football or hockey. But there's structural stress. Next, we have energy system stress. If you're out putting in tons of volume, if you are running marathons or long distance stuff, if you're doing a lot, I'm stressing. Okay, I'm putting a challenge to my energy systems. That's the part that's been challenged. I also have nervous system stress. And these are things we all talk about and we get, but I don't think we always organize it. So, we know the times you've had yourself or an athlete who feels good, they're okay, but they got no pop. Nothing's going. They're in that training phase where it's just gone. Okay, that's a nervous system. The central nervous system is fatigued, but that's different. And then finally, for me, it's mindset. What are the cognitive, what are the emotional stresses going on there? Now, those buckets aren't perfect. They cross over. They're often multiple. But those are my 4 big pillars. And here's where I see it come in, okay, to make this practical, Anthony. People go to these recovery studios. People do these research studies, and they say, oh, red light doesn't fix this. Oh, ice baths do this or don't do that. Oh, massage doesn't do this. Well, what didn't it do? Well, it didn't help recovery. Recovery from what? Recovery in what way? So recovery is specific to the system and the stuff that was stressed. So those NormaTec boots are going to do an awesome job of lymphatic return. They're going to help get fluids flowing. They're going to take the tissue tone down. So they might be great for somebody that's got stuff going in the tissue or really the energy system pillar. Great. That's where we use them. But the electrostim's not going to do the same thing necessarily. The cold bath's not going to do the same thing. Ice baths are great. A great example. Now, I like them. I use them some. I also don't think they're freaking magic. They actually get in the way of some training stress, right? The stress to build hypertrophy, to build strength. When I'm ice bathing after that stimulus, that stress, I just ruined it and added a different stress. So for me, this is just all going, look, yes, there's global stress. There's things that contribute. They affect our autonomic nervous system. They affect us through the whole body. But I also got to think about the specifics. And this is a huge, to me, it's a huge miss in the recovery industry where you walk into these places and they just give you a smorgasbord of things, or at a pro team or whatever. If you just have a smorgasbord, do it yourself menu, build to bear with recovery stuff, right? Go pick your own thing. No, you got to pick the right things if you want it to have a result. So I think we need to just have a more specific lens. So it's not general. We can target our recovery, do it faster, do it better, get better results.
Yeah, it's a great point because you're right. I think if you're having some, mental stress, right? That mindset stress, like, or for, whatever, you're feeling like I'm overwhelmed with this. Maybe meditation is going to work for that. Maybe changing your schedule, doing some things that are going to help you take some of that overwhelm away. But then, like you said, if you're doing something, lower body, like I like the reason why I love the NormaTec is because when I was on my feet for 6 hours straight, I would go right to them, put them on. I felt like it was magic, right? Great.
Yeah, right.
Now that might not have helped the overwhelm from like scheduling or some problems that are going on in my life, but it helped my legs to your point. But I think one thing too, is I learned, there was a guy, Michael Hyatt, I used to do a lot of coaching with, and he, you hit on it in the article, was perception is really important here, because for me, when he talked about going in front of, like speaking, lecturing, doing a presentation, and if you're nervous, and athletes can understand this, right? You're always gonna get nervous for a game. And he used to say, I just reframe it as my body is getting ready for high performance, right? And that changed. Nothing other than that sentence changed, but now I'm
100%.
thinking, ooh, this is all good stuff happening, right? So I think there's an element there that we need to kind of look at it like that, to your point about the perception.
Yeah, I think it's huge. This really was hit home to me early years ago, 20 plus years ago. I got to work with a sports psychologist, guy named Michael Gervais.
Love Michael Gervais.
Mike's a great guy, been a friend for years, but he really introduced that concept to me, to reframing it, right? And now there's research. It shows even the long-term health effects of stress depend on your perception of it. So yeah, it's a skill we get to use. And we would also see it again and again, even in physical modalities. We've tested so many things over the years and get to use it where you get the feedback from athletes, but also we are getting omega waves and HRVs and different. So we could see what things were working and what didn't. The perception still has a big effect, even on stuff that's scientifically proven and real. If the athlete doesn't think it works, if the athlete thinks it's hokey, doesn't matter. It's not going to work. Vice versa. If the athlete thinks it works, I don't care if it's placebo, it still matters. So our perception rules an awful lot.
Yeah. Where else do you feel like we've missed the boat with this recovery idea? Because I just want to go a little deeper. Is it really people just mismatching the recovery modality with the pillar? Is that the main thing here?
I think it's a big one, but I think we have to step back to something even more fundamental. Are they doing enough to need recovery? So if I'm talking about the sports space, okay, in the sporting space and high performance, yeah, I think sometimes we use it way too much. And again, I'm an advocate. I have a business doing this, but I think we overdo it. So you have to have the stimulus to then recover from and adapt. So from a performance standpoint, stimulus first, recover, adapt. We have a whole lot of recovery without stimulus in some settings these days. And I think that causes a problem, but that's a big, deep conversation. On the other side of it, on kind of a more general non-athletic population, I love all our recovery stuff. We mix tissue and tech. That's what we do. That's our approach. We believe there's some amazing things from good soft tissue work, and they're better with the right tech applied. For all that said, if they don't exercise, if they don't sleep, if they don't do basic nutrition, I can't help you recover better. All this other stuff is like putting on deodorant without showering. It might cover it up for a minute, doesn't take care of anything long-term. So I think our bigger problems are actually the context and the philosophy of how we're approaching this. Yeah, there's a lot to do here. And interesting, Anthony, when we started this, we built it off what we were doing with pros. We had a recovery studio in one of our centers where we had the flow pods and cryo and tissue work and all the whole 9 yards. So we did this. And what we're finding regularly is we have to now encourage the exercise part to help people recover more. And it sounds backwards, right? They're coming to us for recovery, but as they keep coming to us and we are learning about them, we're trying to guide them that we can work this tissue all day long. We can do this red light all day long. If you don't actually add some strength to these body parts, if you don't add some motion, our tissue work isn't going to keep that fascia moving if you don't move in between. So we've had to, in our recovery space, talk about exercise way more than we ever guessed.
What about this idea for me? And it reminds me of the old foam roll argument where, when foam rolling first started and people were, kind of like, it's doing A, B, and C, whatever. And I think Coach Boyle, he was probably one of those people, but then it kind of led to more of like, hey, look, if you don't like it, don't do it. But if it makes you feel good, there's something to it. Like, so for me, I absolutely love the cold stuff. Like I wake up, I take a freezing cold shower as cold as I can. That's how I start it. I don't really, when I shave, I put the hot on, but, I just love it. Like I don't talk about benefits. I don't really care. It just makes me feel good. It gets me going. Maybe it's the dopamine hit. I just love it. I kind of feel like, how when you wake up, well, I'm 58. So, when I wake up, I feel like I'm, 97. By the time I get halfway to the bathroom, I'm in my 80s. Get to the bathroom, I'm probably in my late 70s. And, a couple minutes later, I'm getting closer to the 58. But if I take that cold shower, I'm down to, 42. So,
Yep. Yeah.
but whether that's in my head, I really, like you talked about, I don't care if it's placebo, but to what element do you talk to people about that piece of it? Like, you know what, this person really likes this piece of it. It's that idea of like, give them what they need, but also give them some, what they like.
Yeah. And I subscribe to that. I think that's right. We, on our recovery side for athletes, for our studio and general clients, we do want to guide them to the things that are going to help them. Okay, 100%. So we had developed for the 2016 Rio Olympics, we had developed some algorithms. We had got tasked with doing a recovery center with the Chinese Olympic Committee. We were going to have to deal with athletes we didn't know. So it became, oh crap, how do we pick the things that are going to help when I don't know this athlete? They're walking in, they want something. So we spent a lot of time trying to develop algorithms and framework. And so we use them today. Somebody comes in and we have the athletes, the people, they tell us how they're feeling, what they're doing, what they're after. But a big part of that algorithm is their want. So we did all this testing, right? These kind of trying to scientifically decide, did they need nervous system? Did they need energy? The biggest factor is one of the first questions, what do you need today? That perception, how they feel about stuff. And so there's different ways it's worked in, but it reflects that idea that fundamentally that person's perception, that person's wants, they're what's going to drive a lot of this. I geek out. I get very much into the science behind this. My last couple of years doing this now with my wife, my thinking about fascia and tissues and how much force is needed and adhesions or dude, I've been down the rabbit hole of fascia in a whole new way. With all that said, it's not what matters. We want to do things that are scientifically sound,
yep,
at least theoretically, and let the science keep telling us and informing us, but we don't know yet. Dude, we're just figuring this stuff out. So let's do things that seem smart. They have some rationale, but we get to take care of the person in front of us. And that means we have to do things that fit them. And we can pull them little by little. So yeah, I subscribe to that same thing. I think it's important. I'm not telling anybody to stop doing their ice bath or stop doing their sauna or whatever. Like, we're trying to guide them to make choices that fit their lifestyle.
Yeah. And it made me also think of when we were talking about the different pillars, I'll use a NormaTec a lot of times in the evening. My wife kind of usually goes to bed a little bit earlier. And so I'll be like, I'm going to put the NormaTecs on for 45 minutes. And it does kind of bring me down mentally too. So whatever it's doing from lymphatic.
They all interact, right?
Yeah. I'm feeling like, I'm just relaxing. I'm just kind of, I can do whatever. I can go on Twitter and whatever, or I can do some,
or after you went on Twitter, you need to calm down.
Yeah, there you go. I just read the arguments. I don't get into the arguments. Yeah. And we'll segue that into, I really appreciate you coming on today. I got, this information. I saw that tweet. Where are you most active? Is it Twitter?
Yeah, right now it's Twitter. Spending time on Twitter, I made a decision a few years ago to start sharing a little bit more. I was speaking at some conferences, kind of had let that go. So made a decision to start sharing more and having these discussions. So Twitter's the main place, a little bit on Medium right now. And then finally, we're coming out with more courses. We're taking velocities, years of education, and these things. VSP education on Instagram and Twitter is where you'll start seeing more of that.
Very cool. Very cool. Yeah, because there are some really good Twitter conversations in the strength and conditioning community. I think some people don't realize that how important some of those conversations are, because you don't have those conversations on Instagram. They're certainly not on Facebook. So I think Twitter's been a good place for that. So
yeah,
cool.
We try to get our interns to think about that, because they just think about it as a fighting place and cultural stuff. And look, if you pick the right people to follow and you engage, you can get access to some amazing researchers, practitioners around the world that you can't do anywhere else. So I still think there's value there if you stay away from the rest.
Yeah, there you go. Or it's like Coach Boy likes to say, just block all the idiots and then you'll be
pretty
fine.
Much.
Coach, thanks for doing this. Really appreciate you. That is awesome. Thanks for coming on. And hopefully, if we, as we move on and get a little bit more into this, we might have to get you back on to kind of explain some stuff. So we'll go from there.
Happy to do that. Thanks for giving me the chance to share a little bit. Appreciate it.